The note they never heard the first time Sundar heard a piano. He was 6 years old. It wasn't a grand concert or a famous musician. It was an old street player, worn by the years, sitting beside a dusty train station in Chennai. The man's shirt had more holes than buttons, and the keys on the broken piano looked like they hadn't been tuned since before Sundar was born. But when he played, everything else disappeared. The noise of honking cars, the heat, the smell of spices, and the air, all of it faded. There was just the sound. Slow, gentle, like someone telling a secret story through their fingers. Sundar stood still for the whole hour, not blinking. He didn't know why he felt like crying. He didn't know why the notes seemed to speak straight to his heart. He only knew one thing: he wanted to touch that magic. But magic like that didn't belong in his world. Sundar's family didn't have a piano. They didn't even have a radio. His father worked as an electrical engineer, humble and steady. His mother, warm and brilliant, stayed home to take care of Sundar and his brother. They lived in a 2-room apartment where noise bounced off the walls and silence had to be earned with sleep. Dreams were allowed, but only the kind you could afford. Music was not one of them. Yet Sundar could not let go of that sound. At night, he would close his eyes and hear those same notes over and over. He would press his fingers on the wall, pretending each crack was a key. His brother laughed, calling him strange, but Sundar didn't care. Something inside him had been lit, and it would not burn out. One day, at school, he saw a real piano in the music room. It was hidden in the corner, covered in dust and unused. The teacher told him it was broken, too expensive to repair, and nobody in the school knew how to play it anyway. But Sundar asked if he could just sit near it. The teacher shrugged, and that was enough. Every lunch break, Sundar would go there. He didn't touch the keys. He just sat beside it, stared at the black and white, and imagined. In his mind, he played entire concerts. In his mind, he was not a boy from Chennai. He was someone who could move hearts with his hands. Years passed, and life pulled him toward other things. His love for science grew, his curiosity deepened, and soon he was studying metallurgical engineering at Kargar. He worked hard, quietly, the way he always had. He wasn't flashy, wasn't loud. He listened more than he spoke. Professors noticed, friends admired, but few truly knew what lived behind his calm eyes. Then came the day that changed everything. He had been invited to a global tech summit in Vienna. It was his first time in Europe, and everything felt cold and distant. The weather, the buildings, even the people. The event was filled with brilliant minds and loud ideas. Everyone wanted to be heard. Sundar, as usual, remained silent until it was his turn to speak. And when he did, he spoke softly but clearly, his words wrapped in deep thought and quiet strength. People listened, some nodded, but one person rolled his eyes. That person was Adrien Castle, a world-famous pianist. Celebrity at the summit. Arien was not just a pianist. He was a sensation, known for his fiery performances, dramatic, flair, and sharp tongue. He had played for presidents and kings, and his videos had millions of views. When he walked into a room, cameras followed. When he spoke, silence followed. He was not used to being ignored. After Sundar's talk, there was a small private gathering. Wine glasses clicked. Laughter danced in the corners, and egos filled the room like perfume. Sundar stood by a window, quietly watching the snowfall. Adrien walked by and glanced at him. "You don't belong here," he said with a smirk. "You speak like a man who counts numbers, not notes." Sundar turned and smiled politely. "I admire your work," he said. Durayan chuckled. "Do you know anything about music, or do you only listen to code?" "I love music," Sundar said. "I used to pretend to play the piano when I was young." "Pretend?" Adrien raised an eyebrow. "That explains a lot." Others nearby laughed. "It wasn't. Quote, just casual, effortless mockery that kind people throw without thinking." Sundar felt something deep in his chest tighten, but he said nothing. He only nodded and looked down at his hands. Adrien walked away, leaving behind a silence that stayed long after the music resumed. That night, Sundar couldn't sleep. He kept hearing those words. You don't belong here. And then he remembered the dusty piano in his school, the cracked wall keys, the street player from Chennai. And suddenly he knew he didn't need to prove anything. But sometimes the universe waits for a quiet soul to speak. And when it does, the whole world listens. The next morning, during the closing ceremony of the summit, Adrien was set to perform. The hall was packed. Sundar sat in the back, nearly invisible, just as he preferred. Adrien played brilliantly. The audience erupted in applause. But just as the host came up to thank everyone, a soft voice spoke into the mic. May I try something? People turned. It was Sundar. The host hesitated. Confused, Adrien blinked, a faint smirk still resting on his face. The crowd whispered. Just a minute, Sundar said. Adre and shrugged. Be my guest. Sundar walked to the piano. He sat down slowly, as if remembering something long buried. He placed his fingers gently on the keys, and then, without sheet music, without warning, he played. Not a complex piece, not fast or dramatic. Just a simple melody, soft, pure, each note like a drop of rain falling in the desert. People leaned in. The room grew still. The air changed. Here. Played the song he had heard at 6 years old. The one from the train station. The one no one else remembered but him. Tears welled in the eyes of an old woman in the front row. A child stopped playing with his toy. Even Adrien stood frozen. The final note lingered in the room like a heartbeat, and then came the silence. Not awkward, not empty. Full silence. The kind that says everything words never could. But just before anyone could speak, Sundar stood, nodded politely, and began walking off stage. Adrien stepped forward. Sir, he said, voice quiet now. But Sundar didn't stop. He just kept walking. Past the cameras, past the stunned faces, back into the world where silence wasn't empty and music wasn't just notes. Then someone shouted, Who taught you to play? Sundar paused. He turned slightly and said, No one. And the room fell into a deeper silence. Asterisk echoes in silence. Sundar never looked back as he left the stage. He walked slowly, as if each step was not just through the hall, but through the memories that had brought him there. The applause didn't come until long after he had stepped behind the curtains. Even then, it was quiet at first, like the audience was still trying to understand what had just happened. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a show. It was something else. Something you feel in your chest but can't explain. Outside, snow had started to fall again. Sundar walked without a coat, his breath forming little clouds in front of him. Vienna's streets were glowing under the evening lamps. The world calm and unaware that something had just shifted inside. A quiet man who had always lived in the background. He didn't return to the summit that night. Instead, he walked aimlessly. For hours, not noticing the cold or the way people looked at him. His phone buzzed with messages, emails, missed calls, invitations, but he didn't check any of them. His mind wasn't with the moment. It was somewhere deeper. It was in that dusty room in Chennai. It was with the boy who had nothing but silence and dreams. The next morning, everything had changed. His performance had gone viral. Someone had recorded it on their phone and uploaded it online. The video spread like a fire that no one expected. Within hours, millions had seen it. There were no graphics, no fancy camera angles, no dramatic lighting. Just a man in a suit sitting at a piano, playing something soft and unfamiliar. Yet, somehow, it hit people right in the soul. Comments poured in. Not just from music lovers, but from people who had never cared about music before. They wrote things like, I don't know why I'm crying. This made me call my mother. I feel like he played something I forgot I knew. For the first time, Sundar was not being praised for his mind. He was being heard for something else, something more human. At Google headquarters. The mood was different. He returned to the office a few days later, thinking life would continue as before. But the moment he stepped inside, people stood and clapped, not out of formality, not out of duty, but out of something far more rare in corporate spaces, genuine emotion. He smiled gently, gave a small bow, and went straight to his desk. He didn't want the attention. He didn't want the spotlight. He just wanted silence again. But silence had changed Dot in meetings. People looked at him differently. Not just as a CEO, but as a person they didn't quite understand anymore. They whispered. They asked questions. Some even tried to bond with him over music. Even though he had never called himself a musician, then came the unexpected A-D-R-A-N Castle. The pianist who had mocked him reached out. The email was short. I owe you an apology. May I speak with you? Asterisk Sundar didn't reply at first. Not out of anger, but uncertainty. What was there to say? The performance wasn't revenge. It wasn't meant to silence anyone. It was just something he had needed to do for himself. But something in the message lingered. Something in Adrian's tone felt different. Not proud. Not defensive. But small. Human. After 3 days, Sundar replied, yes. They met in a quiet hotel cafe in San Francisco. No cameras, no reporters. Just two men, a table between them, and the echo of something unspoken in the air. Asterisk. Adrian looked different. Not the confident, camera-ready figure from Vienna. He looked tired, humbled, like someone who had been carrying a question he didn't know how to ask. I didn't expect that. Adrian said softly. Most people didn't. Sundar replied, or Ian, sipped his coffee. His hands, the same hands that had played in front of thousands, trembled slightly. I've spent my life trying to be perfect, he said, every note, every gesture. I've studied under masters, practiced until my fingers bled. But when you played, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished. But it felt real, more real than anything I've heard in years. Sundar didn't answer right away. He looked out the window watching a boy across the street chase pigeons. I never learned to play, he said finally. I never had a teacher. I just remembered. I remembered how it made me feel, and I played from there. Adrian leaned back, his pride slowly unraveling. Do you know what that does to someone like me? He asked, half laughing, half aching. I've built my entire identity on being better. On being untouchable. And then one song from a man who doesn't even call himself a musician. And the world forgets everything I've done. Sundar turned to him gently. I didn't play to take anything away from you, he said. I played to remember who I was before the world told me who I should be. The words landed with quiet weight. Adrian looked down, ashamed, but also lighter. Can I hear it again? He asked. Sundar smiled softly. I only play when I forget I'm playing, he said. I don't know if I can do it again. Adrian nodded. Double quotes, then let me help you remember, he said. And so, something began. Not a rivalry, not a duet, something else. Something built on respect, born from humility. They started meeting in secret. Sundar would bring memories. Adrian would bring structure. One played from feeling. The other from form. Slowly, they began building something together. Something strange. Something new. But as their private sessions continued, the world began to wonder. Why had the CEO of the biggest tech company started disappearing for hours each week? Why was Adrian Castle canceling tours and avoiding press? Rumors began. Speculation grew. Some called it a midlife crisis. Some said Sundar was preparing to leave Google. Others believed he was composing something. And then came the leak. Someone from inside the studio they used had recorded a portion of their private session. It was short, just 40 seconds, but it didn't sound like anything people had heard before. It wasn't classical. It wasn't jazz. It wasn't digital. It was something raw and fluid, like a storm trying to become a song. Once again, the internet exploded. The clip was everywhere. People begged for more. Headlines screamed, what are Sundar and Adrian creating? From CEO to composer, the secret music of Sundar Pichai, is this the future of music and machine? Once again, Sundar stood at the center of attention he had never asked for. And this time, it came with consequences. Board members began to ask questions. Shareholders grew uneasy. His focus was being questioned. Was he still committed to the company? Or was he losing himself in something else? Sundar was summoned to a private meeting with the board. He arrived, calm as always. But this time, something inside him had changed. He wasn't just the man who built Android. He wasn't just the leader who guided billions. He was someone who had found a voice in silence, and now had to decide whether to keep it hidden or let it be heard. A voice spoke from the end of the long table. Sundar, we're concerned. Is your heart still with us? Sundar looked around the room. Familiar faces, serious eyes. Then he took a breath and said something no one expected. I've spent my life building systems that help the world speak, he said, but I never stopped to ask what my own voice sounded like. A pause filled the room. He continued, don't want to leave, but I also can't keep living in only one part of myself. No one spoke. He stood slowly. I'm not asking for permission to be whole, he said. I'm simply letting you know it's time. He walked out, leaving the boardroom in silence. And once again, the world waited. What would he do next? What? Was this music they were creating? What did it mean to be a man of reason who now followed feeling? Asterisk, when silence becomes a voice, Sundar did not return to work the next day. Or the day after that. His calendar remained full, but his seat at the long glass conference table sat empty. Some said he was preparing to resign. Others whispered of burnout, of a brilliant mind unraveling quietly beneath the weight of expectation. But the truth was neither of those things. Sundar wasn't lost. He was listening, perhaps for the first time in his life, to something he had spent decades ignoring. It wasn't ambition. It wasn't duty. It was longing. He spent his mornings alone in a small rented studio in the Mission District of San Francisco. It had no windows, just 4 bare walls, a wooden floor, and a single piano. It wasn't a grand piano, just a modest, upright with faded keys and a slightly uneven pedal. But it was enough. Adre and joined him 3 times a week. Their sessions had become quiet rituals. No greetings, no warm-ups, just silence, followed by music. They spoke less now. Not because there was tension, but because the music had started to carry the conversations they couldn't put into words. Sometimes Sundar would play something fragile, almost unfinished, and Adrien would build around it, adding notes like gentle scaffolding. Sometimes Adrien would storm into the room and pour fury into the keys, and Sundar would slow it down, soften the fire into something warm and grieving. What they were making wasn't just music. It was memory. It was conflict. It was forgiveness. Each piece they created carried a part of them, Adrien's longing to be more than a perfectionist, Sundar's desire to be more than a builder. They weren't just composing. They were revealing, but revelation comes with risk. One evening, after a long session that left both men emotionally exhausted, Adrien said something that neither of them could forget. Do you think people will understand this? Sundar didn't answer right away. He ran his fingers across the keys, not playing, just feeling the grooves where the ivory had worn thin. I don't know, he said. But I think it's time we stop making things to be understood and start making things to be felt. Adrien leaned back, his arms crossed, eyes on the ceiling. We should perform it, he said. Sundar turned. Perform it? Yes. Live. One time. No announcement. No tickets. Just play it. And whoever shows up, shows up. Sundar shook his head. Slowly. I'm not a performer. Adrien smiled faintly. That's why it has to be you. The idea haunted Sundar for days. A public performance meant exposure, attention, pressure, all the things he had spent his life avoiding. But it also meant honesty. And he was beginning to learn that sometimes honesty was the only way to be. Free. He agreed on one condition. No stage, no lights. Just people, close enough to hear our breathing. Adrien nodded. I know the perfect place. They chose a small hall in the city's old Mission District. It had once been a church, then a theater, then abandoned. Now it was being used for open mic nights and forgotten poetry readings. No press. No luxury. Just wood, stone, and space. They called the piece Unfinished Room. Not because it wasn't complete, but because it would never be. They rehearsed for weeks, adding and stripping away layers of the music. Sometimes they argued, Adrien pushing for clarity, Sundar pushing for silence. But in the tension, something powerful was born. A sound that didn't fit any category. A melody that couldn't be hummed. A rhythm that pulsed like a heartbeat under grief. The day of the performance arrived. There was no ticket booth, no usher, no red carpet, just a handwritten sign taped to the door. Unfinished room, one night only. Asterisk inside. People sat on the floor, shoulders touching, backs resting against walls. There were no rows. No separation. The audience was part of the room, just as broken. And beautiful as the music they were about to hear. Adrien entered first. Dressed in black, head bowed. Sundar followed, in a simple gray shirt. Hands trembling slightly. They didn't speak. They sat and began. The opening was soft, so soft that some leaned forward, unsure whether the music had started. A single note held longer than comfort allowed. Then another slightly off-center. It was not a mistake. It was an invitation. The piece moved like a conversation between two people who had known each other for a lifetime, but had never said what needed to be said. There were pauses filled with silence that said more than any lyric. There were rises and falls, like waves chasing each other to the shore and pulling back just before they could touch. At one point, Sundar stopped playing. Altogether, and Adrien played alone, fast and unrelenting. Then he, too, stopped. The room held its breath, and then Sundar began again, but not on the keys. He began humming. A single, low, untrained hum. Raw, cracked, human. The audience stilled. Someone gasped. Adre and joined him, not in song, but by playing beneath the hum. Like roots holding up a fragile tree. The piece ended without warning. No final note, no flourish. Just a slow fade into nothing. And then, for a long moment, no one clapped. Asterisk, not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't want to break what had just happened. Finally, a single tearful voice whispered, "Thank you." And that was enough. They left the hall in silence, slipping through the back door into the night. But not everyone left them alone. Outside, a woman in her 60s waited. She approached Sundar carefully, holding something in her hand. Asterisk. "My son," she said softly. "He passed last year. He was a musician. Your music tonight, it sounded like him. It gave him back to me for a few minutes. Thank you." Sundar's throat closed. He tried to speak but failed. The woman placed a small folded piece of paper in his hand and walked away. He opened it later that night. It read, "You're not unfinished. You're still becoming." He folded the paper and kept it in his pocket. He still keeps it there to this day. But what he didn't know then, what none of them knew, was that someone had recorded the performance, not for fame, not for profit, just to remember. And days later, the video leaked online. And the world changed. Again. Asterisk. The sound behind. The Silent Seth video appeared online without warning. No title. No watermark. No introduction. Just a quiet upload on an anonymous account, labeled only "Unfinished Room, live recording." In the first hour. It was viewed a few dozen times. By morning. Tens of thousands. By nightfall. Millions. People didn't just watch it, they felt it. The comments section became a living river of emotion. Strangers left confessions. Musicians left their instruments behind. People who had never cried at music found themselves weeping in office chairs, at kitchen tables, in silence. I watched this in the middle of a fight with my father. I stopped. I called him. We cried together. This is what my depression sounds like. But somehow, it made me feel less alone. I've never seen Sundar Pichai's face look like that. Like he wasn't trying to be anything. Just trying to be. Some called it a masterpiece. Some called it strange, but most called it human. And that was the one word. Sundar couldn't stop hearing human. He had always believed technology was about people. About improving lives, solving problems. But somewhere along the line, the world had started to see him as something else, less a person, more a machine. A brilliant mind, a quiet leader, a builder of systems. Not a feeler. Not a soul dot until now, but with vulnerability comes exposure. And exposure always brings conflict dot just 3 days after the video's release. Sundar was called again. This time, not by his board dot by shareholders. A private call, direct, clinical dot the voice on the other end was calm, but sharp or concerned. About narrative confusion. The public sees you now as an artist. That creates risk, uncertainty. Sundar listened. He didn't argue. He didn't explain because he knew what they were really saying. They weren't afraid of the music. They were afraid of the shift. When a person stops fitting inside the box they've been placed in, those who built the box feel threatened. They want control, they want comfort. But Sundar had tasted something else, not fame, not praise, freedom, and once you taste freedom, even in a whisper, you can't pretend it didn't change you. That night he met Adrien again, this time not at the studio, but in the hills above the city. They stood side by side looking out over San Francisco's, the sky dark and wide. I think they want me to stop. Sundar said, Ian didn't look surprised. They always do, he replied. Anytime you step outside their version of you? Sundar nodded, his breath slow. What if they're right? He asked, what if this is just noise? Adrien turned to him, eyes steady. You silence the world, he said. Not by shouting. Not by rising, but by being still. If that's noise, then maybe the world needs more of it. They stood in silence after that dot, but the seed had already been planted, and it was growing dot the next morning. Sundar walked into Google headquarters and called a company-wide town hall. The room filled quickly. Thousands joined remotely. Everyone expected something dramatic. A resignation, an announcement, a change in direction. But what Sundar said was something else entirely. I want to tell you a story, he began, and then he spoke of the first piano he ever saw, the broken one in the corner of his childhood school. He spoke of pretending to play music against the walls of his room, of hearing a street musician in Chennai when he was 6, of never forgetting that sound, even when he became a man known for systems, not soul. He spoke of being mocked, he spoke of silence, and then he said something no one expected. Technology is powerful, but it is not complete. We're not complete until we remember the parts of ourselves we abandoned for the sake of performance. A long pause followed. He looked at them, not as a CEO speaking to a company, but as a man speaking to people. We're going to launch something new. He said, the screens behind him changed, a single word appeared. Hums, he explained it slowly. Hums will be a space, not a product, not a platform. A space where people can leave behind sound, a fragment, a note, a memory. No filters, no likes, just echoes of who we are in music. No one clapped at first because no one understood until he said this. Everyone's trying to be loud. What if we just tried to be heard? Within weeks, Hums was born. A quiet app, no social features, just a place to upload raw sound. No editing tools, no autoplay, no noise. People could listen. They could post, but they could not judge, and slowly, something strange began to happen. People began uploading more than music. A nurse humming to herself after a night shift. A boy recording the wind through his bedroom window. A daughter saving her grandmother's voice singing in the kitchen. Hums became a digital archive of realness. And Sundar didn't promote it. He didn't sell it. He just listened. But behind the scenes, tension grew. Tech journalists mocked the idea. Competitors dismissed it. Another CEO having a midlife crisis. One headline read. But Sundar stayed quiet. Until one night, he posted something on Hums himself. Just a 19-second clip. A single note. Played slowly. A deep breath and a whisper. I am still learning how to speak. That clip became the most shared sound on the platform. Not because it was brilliant, because it was true. But then came the twist. 6 months into Hums, the unexpected happened. Someone posted a clip with no name. No title. Just 4 seconds of melody. But when Adrien heard it, he froze. He replayed it 20 times. His face pale. He called Sundar immediately. You need to hear this. They met at a studio that same night. Adrie and played the clip on a loop. Sundar listened once. Twice. On the third time, his eyes narrowed. I know this, he said. Adrie and nodded. So do I, but it's not ours. And then they realized the melody, those 4 seconds, was the exact same one Sundar had heard in Chennai. When he was 6. The one the street player had played. The sound that started everything. This can't be a coincidence. Sundar whispered. They checked the user profile. No. Name. Just a number. And a location ping from Mumbai. A single question burned in the room. Who was the person who posted the sound that first awakened Sundar's music? Who was echoing him across decades? And why now? The answer, as they would soon learn, was far more complicated. And far more dangerous. Asterisk. The sound that came back. Melody would not stop playing in Sundar's mind. 4 seconds. Just 4. Barely enough for a theme. Too short to be a full idea. But those few notes had weight. They carried something old. Not just from his childhood, not just from the train station in Chennai, but something deeper. Like a voice calling from beneath time itself. Not loud, not desperate. Just steady. Patient. Waiting. For days. Sundar and Adrien tried to find the source of the upload. Hums was designed with anonymity at its core. No usernames, no profiles, just sounds. Each clip only carried a timestamp and a general location tag. The post they had found came from Mumbai. The user had uploaded just that one clip. No more, no replies. And then disappeared. Ie and wanted to let it go. Maybe it's just a coincidence, he said. Maybe someone remembered the tune the same way you did. But Sundar couldn't, because this wasn't like a memory. This was the memory. The exact phrasing, the exact hesitation between notes. The way the final tone stretched just slightly. Longer than expected, like the player wasn't reading music, but remembering it from something lost. It's him, Sundar said softly. The man at the train station. The one who made me stop walking. How could it be? Adrien asked. That was almost 40 years ago. I don't know, Sundar whispered. But I have to find him. And so he returned quietly, without media, without security. Just a one-way flight to India, and a heart full of questions. He hadn't been back to Chennai in years. The streets were more crowded now. The buildings taller, the air heavier. But the sounds remained. Horns, footsteps, temple bells in the distance. A strange comfort wrapped in noise. He didn't go to his childhood home. He didn't call anyone. He went straight to the train station. It was late when he arrived. Past midnight. The place was quieter than he remembered, but still alive. Chai vendors leaned against their carts. Children slept beside mothers wrapped in thin blankets. Announcements crackled overhead, slightly delayed, slightly off key, and then there it was. The same corner. Near platform 3, where the piano used to sit. But the piano was gone now. In its place was a food stall. Modern, plastic signs. Flashing lights. Sundar stood there for a long time, not moving, not speaking, until a voice beside him broke the silence. You look like someone who lost something. An old man, thin, with silver hair that caught the light like thread. He held a metal teacup, steam curling from it slowly. I used to come here, Sundar said. A long time ago, there was a piano. A man who played. The old man nodded slowly. Yes, he said. Raghu. You remember him? Sundar asked quickly. Everyone remembers Raghu, the man replied. He didn't just play. He healed. Sundar's breath caught in his throat. Where is he now? He asked. The man paused. Then looked down. Disappeared. 15 years ago. Some say he went mad. Others say he left to find his son. His son? Sundar whispered. The man looked up. His eyes sharp. Yes. Some say he had a boy once. Brilliant. But something happened. Something broke them apart. No one knows the full story. Sundar stepped back. His heart thudding. He couldn't say why. But something inside him shifted. Was it possible? Could that boy be the one who uploaded the melody? Was the sound not a memory but a message? The next morning, He left for Mumbai. He had nothing but a location ping and a sound clip. He started visiting local music schools, asking quiet questions, playing the 4-second clip on a small speaker, watching faces for recognition. Most shook their heads. Some smiled politely. But then, at a small community center near the edge of the city, a teacher paused. "I know this," she said. Sundar leaned forward. "Where?" he asked. "A boy played this here, once, maybe 2 years ago." He didn't stay long. He had a strange energy, like he was always listening to something only he could hear. "Do you remember his name?" She thought for a moment. "Arun," she said. "Arun Raghu?" Sundar's knees felt weak. Arun Raghu. The same name. The same melody. Adrien had once said something. Music is memory path between strangers. But this wasn't a stranger. This was someone trying to speak back. He found an old social profile. No photo. No posts. But there was a private messaging feature. Sundar hesitated. Then typed one sentence. "I heard your melody. And I remember." He waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, a reply appeared. "I wasn't sure you were real." Sundar felt a strange chill run through him. "Where are you?" he asked. "Watching," came the reply. "Waiting." Then a final message. "I want to meet, but not as Sundar Pichai. Not as a man the world knows, just me." Where it began, attached was a location pin. Not Mumbai. Not Chennai. A small village far from the city, by a river. A place called Kanavi. Sundar booked a driver that night. The road was long, unpaved in parts. Trees hung low over the path, branches brushing against the windows like whispers. When he arrived, there was no welcome. No signs. Just a small hut beside the river, and a figure sitting cross-legged near the bank. Barefoot. Still. Sundar stepped out slowly. The man looked up. He was young 20s, maybe. Eyes dark, wide, filled with something that looked like music and sadness woven together. "You came," he said. "I had to," Sundar replied. The young man smiled faintly. "I never knew if that day meant anything to you." "It changed my life," Sundar said. "You changed mine," the man whispered. "My father never forgot the way you listened." The silence between them was not empty. "You're his son," Sundar said softly. "Yes." "And the melody?" "He used to play it when he missed something, when he missed me, after I left." Sundar sat beside him, the ground cold beneath them. "Why did you send it to me?" "Because," Arun said, "my father passed away last year." He left behind his piano, broken, covered in dust, and a note. He reached into his pocket and handed Sundar a folded piece of paper. It read, "If the boy from the station ever finds you, remind him some music never ends." Sundar closed his eyes and felt the boy he had once been begin to cry. Arun stood, walked to the hut, and returned with something wrapped in cloth. A small keyboard. Missing 3 keys. He placed it in Sundar's lap. One last duet. Arun said, "For him." They sat. They played. No audience. No recording. No world watching. Just 2 men. And the river. In a sound the world was never meant to hear, but needed to. Asterisk. The last note never fantasy played until the light changed. By the river in Canterbury, where the earth was soft and the air was still. Sundar and Arun sat side by side on the worn ground, their knees nearly touching, hands moving across chipped keys that couldn't give full chords anymore. It didn't matter. The music didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be honest. Arun played low, steady notes, letting them roll like the current behind them. Sundar followed, his fingers uncertain at first, but warming with memory. Not memory from books or meetings or data, but the kind that lives in the body. The kind that surfaces when words fail. This wasn't a performance. It wasn't for the world. It was for Raghu. And for the child, each man had once been silent. Waiting, listening. When they finished, they didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The river carried the final note into the wind. Sundar felt something leave his chest. Not pain. Not sorrow. Just release. Arun turned to him, his face soft, but Unreadable. Will you tell them? He asked. Sundar shook his head gently. No, he said. Some music is meant to stay between those who understand it. They shared a quiet smile, small and real. A few hours later, Sundar left Conover without fanfare. The road back was quieter than before. He didn't check his phone. He didn't think about emails or meetings or stock prices. He simply watched the sky. Something inside him had changed. But the world hadn't waited. Back in Silicon Valley. Questions had piled up. Media outlets were now calling Unfinished Room one of the most enigmatic artistic movements of the decade. Analysts argued over whether Sundar's involvement in hums was a distraction or a visionary step. Adrien, for his part, had remained mostly silent, choosing instead to compose quietly in Europe, rarely appearing in public. But Sundar's name was everywhere, though not for his role as a tech leader. But as the man who whispered when everyone else shouted. Investors still pressured. Some called for a leadership change. Others wanted him to pivot hums into a monetized platform. Sundar responded with neither resistance nor agreement. He simply invited them all to a private event. No press. No stage. Just one room and a piano. When the group arrived, 50 people, powerful, impatient, they were led into a small studio. The lights were dim. No speeches were prepared. No deck. No graphs. Just Sundar. He stood in front of them, calm and barefoot, wearing the same shirt he had worn that night in Vienna. He walked to the piano and sat. And then, in silence, began to play. Not a song. Not a composition. Just the melody. The one from the station. The one from RUN. The one from the man named Raghu, who gave him the gift of listening before he ever learned to speak. It was raw. Simple. Repeating. Like a heartbeat. One of the board members, a woman known for never showing emotion, put her hand to her chest. Another executive closed his eyes. A third removed her glasses to wipe her tears. And then Sundar stopped. He turned and said, just one thing. What I build from now on will sound like this. And left the room. No one followed, because no one could. In the weeks that followed, things began to shift. Not because Sundar forced them to, but because truth, when played softly enough, sometimes becomes louder than noise. Hums continued to grow. Not like a trend, but like a forest. Quietly, underground, slowly spreading roots through people's hearts. It didn't become a billion-dollar product. It didn't dominate markets. But it did change lives. Musicians used it to share fragments. They were too scared to sing aloud. Children recorded bedtime songs their parents used to sing. A man in his 70s uploaded his wife's laugh, just that, her laugh as a memory. And then came something unexpected. Governments began to reach out. Schools. Mental health programs. Asking if hums could be integrated into education, into therapy, into recovery spaces. Because the platform had done something no one expected. It had made people remember themselves. Not their careers, not their screens. Themselves. Sundar never returned fully to the world he'd once ruled. He stayed on in an advisory role at Google. But mostly, he walked. He played. He listened. He would travel to cities unannounced, enter music schools quietly, and ask students to play for him. He never judged. He never recorded. He just listened. And thanked him. Once, in London, a student asked him, why? Do you care so much about broken music? And he smiled, because that's the only kind that knows how to heal. Adrien, too, changed. His performances became less grand, more human. He began improvising on stage, allowing silence to guide him. He spoke less in interviews, but when he did, he often said the same thing. Perfection is the sound fear makes when it forgets how to feel. One final detail remains. A year after their journey began, Arun uploaded one last clip to hums. Just the sound of water. In a voice. Asterisk, not his. But his father's. If someone hears this, Raghu's voice said gently, tell them music doesn't need to be played to exist. Sometimes it just needs to be remembered. And then nothing. Just silence. But not the empty kind. The full kind. The kind that holds you. The kind that changes everything. In somewhere in a quiet room with old walls and tired keys. Sundar sat once again. He placed his fingers on the piano and played. A note that never ended, not because it rang forever, but because someone somewhere would always remember how it felt. Asterisk,